Hi, Paul. How are you going? Great to connect with you again. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you and see you.
Wonderful. You can hear and see you as well. Great to connect with you again.
Yes, well, thank you for the invite.
It's really a pleasure to have you back and talk to our students. So these are all new students. So this course runs twice a year, and we're still doing it online. So it's we haven't had any physical classes. So
Right, yeah, it's the same here in Chile. We don't think the universities and schools are going back until now, probably mid next year.
wow, yeah. It's going to be very different. We're not traveling anywhere. So, I mean, Australia is doing relatively fine. We have mini outbreaks from time to time. And then we had a kind of a bad case of an outbreak in one of the states in Victoria. And I'm not sure if you heard in the news, but I mean, everywhere is a bit of a mess. But, we'll get through this together somehow.
On behalf of the planet, I think it may, hopefully lead to a lasting positive impact because people have had an opportunity to think about the future. Usually people are not, so involved in day-to-day life that the future doesn't really come into the picture. But I think that from what I'm seeing, a lot of people are now beginning to think of the future. And, here in Patagonia, which heavily relies on the tourist industry, people have virtually got used to the idea of it being closed down. And consequently, we are involved in helping people create food gardens and a whole bunch of food gardens in schools, which I've always thought is a wonderful thing. So in that sense, for our region, there's definitely quite a few positives, which is good out of a very negative situation, because you hope that, if something bad happens, that something good at least comes out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the important thing. What positive can we bring out of this negative situation locally and globally? So that's great to see that that's happening in Chile, in your area.
Yeah. Yeah, it is our region, especially because we are so remote, and we only have 6 intensive care beds in a region for 100,000 people over 100,000 square kilometers. So people here have voluntarily shut down because everyone was really afraid of it getting into the region, and us definitely not being able to cope with it. So for our part of Chile, it's been very different to the rest. The rest is going through the same turmoil as the rest of the world. But at least in our region, it's been kept at bay, and hopefully will stay that way.
Wonderful. Good. And so, Paul, we'll just wait another minute or two because students, generally we begin the class 5 minutes past the hour. You may remember last time when last time you gave a talk, we actually had a physical class, but we had half the students in the class and half the students online. But this time everyone's online.
Yes, and it's really wonderful. I'm looking at the names of all of your students, and they're literally from everywhere on the planet by the looks of it. It's really fascinating.
Yes, actually, a lot of people are back in their hometowns, in other cities, and some in other countries, and so they've tuned in from many people from their hometown, really. So it's great to see, and they're just joining now. And how's everything on your end? It's like the weather's not how's the weather there now right now?
Well, I'm getting the impression that we might get a hot summer. Winter's been good because we've had plenty of snow and lots of rain. But today it suddenly got warm, and it doesn't usually get that warm that quick. Obviously, looking at the rest of the planet and seeing how it's heating up, we're in a very fortunate position here because we are, as you know, not too far from Antarctica, So, and our region has not really suffered from the extensive heat like Australia and United States, and now the Amazon's on fire too. So I've been out there on my hands and knees for the last couple of months, clearing ferns away with a sickle to plant more trees, but also to alleviate the fire risk, just in case. We've never had a big fire here, but I'm certainly all the time trying to mitigate any possibility of that happening. But right now, like I say, it's been a too lovely day. But no complaints. The year's going well. Yeah, we're getting lots of things in the ground. Vegetables have suddenly shot up so much that Konomi was just telling me that she's a bit concerned because it's before transplanting, and she wants to get them in the ground before they shoot up and start, sprouting seeds before we can even eat them.
Yeah. Well. It's almost 5 past, so and we've got more students here now, Paul. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to week 7. Hope you all had a break. They all actually had a week off university, so they've hopefully coming in fresh. Hope you had a good break and had some time to relax and enjoy this beautiful spring weather. And that's what we share, Paul, as well, because both our countries are in the southern hemisphere, so we're all going through spring right now. So welcome, and today we have a very special guest, Mr. Paul Coleman, whom I was very honored to meet just over a decade ago, Paul. It was in Tokyo. It was September 2010. It was a conference called, I believe it was called Be the Change. Yeah. And we had Deepak Chopra and Ehan Deravi and a few special people there. And Paul was one of the speakers, and I was very much inspired by Paul's work, who was basically going around the world, walking on foot, planting lots and lots of trees, thousands upon thousands of trees. And at that time, Paul, you were telling us the story of traveling from Canada down to South America, Mexico, I think was, planting trees with, and that was really inspiring. So I was lucky enough to connect with Paul then, and now have the opportunity to invite him to give a talk to our students, to all of you. And Paul is right now in Patagonia, South America, living there with developed a very sustainable lifestyle for himself and his community there, and with his lovely wife, Konomi, who's also there, residing there. And lots of great stories to tell, inspiring stories. So we're really looking forward to it. So yeah, and thank you so much, Paul, for joining today. We're really grateful. So and without further ado, I'll hand over to you.
Great. Well, thank you again for the invite, and I'll get straight into it because I could talk for weeks and days. Okay. I was born in Manchester back in the 1950s, and when I was growing up as a kid, it was the heart of the industrial empire, basically, and it was extremely contaminated. We had a ship canal, which we also used to know by another name, which I'm not going to to say now, because it was so contaminated that we knew that if we fell into it, we'd have to go to the hospital. So in this rugged industrial environment, I grew up, and as a child, I used to dream of going to the Amazon. I would read books of the Amazon when I was a kid, and I always dreamed that it was me leading the expeditions, wading through piranha-infested waters, meeting up with the Indians in the forest. And these dreams basically led me to a life of travel. I left school when I was 15, and fairly soon afterwards, I joined the British Merchant Navy with the dream and intention of sailing over to the Amazon, because there were ships going up the Amazon. And I spent 6 years in the Merchant Navy sailing all over the world, but I never got to see the Amazon. But I was observing it all of that time from afar. Then I got a job over in Canada. I became a chauffeur to a tremendously wealthy old lady who was a friend of the British royal family. And for 10 years, I drove Rolls Royces, stayed in the finest hotels all over the world. And as far as I was concerned, I was living my life like a king. But by 1988, there was something that was tearing at me. It was like my life was splitting apart. On the one side, I had everything. And on the other side, I had nothing. I had all of the parties and the life and the money and the travel. But on the other side, my dream, the Amazon, was literally going up in smoke. But in 1988, that was when it was really in the news for the first time about the great fires of the Amazon. And I was wondering, what on earth can I do? I'm a chauffeur, I'm not a scientist. How can I do something to help protect the Amazon and such places as this? So I decided that for the first time in my life, I needed to be alone. And so I thought, where can I go to be alone? So I looked at my globe and looked at the globe, and I came to a place where I found very little information on Iceland. At that time, I didn't know anyone who'd been to Iceland. I didn't know anything about Iceland. And I thought, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll buy a bicycle and I'll cycle around Iceland, because if I do that, I'll be by myself for sure. So I hadn't cycled in like 20 years or something. And so anyway, I got on a plane, got a bicycle, and began cycling around Iceland. One of the first things that struck me was the fact that I could literally take my water bottle and put it into any river that I liked and could drink straight from the river. And I had a video camera, and I actually filmed myself standing in the middle of a freezing cold river going, look at this. I can drink from a river, because I wanted to show all my friends back in Manchester and Toronto that it was possible. And as I cycled around, I thought, why can the world not be like this? Why are we poisoning the oceans, poisoning the rivers, destroying the forests? Why are we doing this? And as I cycled around, I tried to answer, oh, because of this and because of that. And I finally came to the conclusion there was no excuse for it. And then one day I found myself on the plains of Thingvellir, which is where the continental shelves, the continental plates of the Europas and the Americas meet. It's always been ripped by earthquakes, being torn apart and coming back together again in all sorts of strange shapes and forms. And it's also the ancient seat of democracy for Iceland. For 1,000 years, the people had journeyed across the land in the most incredibly harsh environment to celebrate democracy. They would stand beneath a cliff and they would listen to the law speaker deliver the laws of the land. And then for a couple of weeks, they would get together in community, and then they'd go back to their lives and probably not see their neighbors for another year. And how they held this democracy together and this appreciation of the environment was through the form of stories, of fairy tales, of great sagas. And these sagas carried the land through 1,000 years of democracy, and of course made it so that you could, we were able to drink water straight from the rivers. And so in this place, I suddenly had a realization. I thought, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll become a writer of fairy tales, and I'll travel the planet writing of its beauty in the hopes that I can convince people as to why it is that we need to preserve all that is the beauty of our earth. Because within that beauty lies the magic and mystery that gives us imagination, gives us creation, gives us the dreams and the ability to move forward and and go to fresh and beautiful places. So I came back to Canada. I immediately gave up my job, and the first thing everybody told me was, oh, you're crazy. What are you doing giving up this job? You're going to become a writer of fairy tales. And I said, yes, I'm going down to the Amazon. I'm going to lead an expedition. And, everyone, of course, no, you're going to get yourself killed. I've been all over the world, and I'd never thought about getting myself killed until I went to the Amazon. And anyway, so they continued on like that until I got on an aeroplane. I flew down to South America in 1989. I went to Peru. And I must admit, when I got off the airplane, it was in the middle of the time of the Sendero Luminoso. There was people, machine guns all over the street. I got out of the taxi at a hotel. By the time I got out of the taxi, I was immediately surrounded by 4 great big guys with guns in armor. And they were there to escort me about 20 meters into the hotel. And I thought, my God, maybe I am crazy. I'm going to get myself killed. But anyway, after a week or so, I got used to it, and I went off and I went to Cusco, got on the back of a truck, went over the mountains, over the Andes, to the most remote place I could find. I had a guidebook, South American Explorer, and I looked all through this book, the most detailed book imaginable, and I found a place that only had one sentence written about it. It was just opened up, and I thought, right, that's where I'm going. I wanted to go there because I thought, this place has just opened up. I'm going to see all of the problems in this one place. What happens when you put in a road and then people start flooding into the forest? And so I ended up in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the jungle. It just opened up and was being panned for gold. And my experience with gold is that the closer you get to gold, the poorer the people become. While there, I met a woodsman, and I also met another guy who was there for similar reasons. And I asked the woodsman if he could make a raft, which would be, I think it was 3 meters by 2 meters, a little bit bigger than your average door. And he, in the course of a week, we lived in a hut in the jungle there, and he constructed this raft out of tiny balsa wood, tiny pieces of balsa wood, fastened with tree bark. And we got onto the raft on it. This was the Madre de Dios River. It's deep in the forest. We knew absolutely nothing about what was coming up next, except for the fact there was a village that was about 40 kilometers downriver, and that we had to be in that. Otherwise, we had another 250 kilometers to go through the jungle, and we really didn't know if we could survive that. So we had to make sure we got into that village. So we got on this little piece of wood, and we hurtled down the Amazon, because it was a lot faster than you'd imagine, because this is probably about 3,000 kilometers up the Amazon in the Andes. So it's flowing extremely fast. And along the way, we passed an indigenous village, which was off to our left. And all these kids came running out, and the adults, maybe there was 50 or 60 people, and they were so excited to see a couple of crazy white people, probably never seen anything before, hurtling by on a raft, and they were waving and cheering and shouting, and they were so happy. And I was like, yes, this will work. The idea of me going down by myself was, I realized that if I was going to lead an expedition, I had to go down by myself, because otherwise, it would be unfair to bring people on a journey that I hadn't experienced myself. It could be dangerous, and I wanted to do it by myself to see if it was practical. And I realized that it was. And one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to connect the Western world and the indigenous world. And I thought that through a form of a story, I could do just that. So I came back to Canada, and I placed an ad in a local newspaper, and it was a big ad. And I said, let your imagination go wild. I have penned a fairy tale. I'm looking for people to make it come true. Artists, poets, musicians to come on a 700 kilometer balsa raft expedition down with me, down the Amazon, and we will share a better knowledge of our planet and an opportunity to creatively shine. I wanted to bring creative people there so that they could point out the beauty of the forest in all of their work afterwards. And also, I asked for an indigenous person, because I also wanted to connect the indigenous people of the North and the South. And so the response to this, by the way, this ad, I thought people were either going to, go for it, or they're going to think I'm crazy. They went for it, and I got 25 calls in a couple of days. And the magazine that put it in sent a journalist around to interview me about the ad. He came round, spoke to me for a couple of hours. At the end, he was on the way out the door, and he turned around and said, "Can I come?" So I said, "Yeah, sure." He was 21 years old, University of Toronto student. I think he got into university when he was 16 years old. Absolutely brilliant genius. He was studying rainforest issues anyway. So the newspaper funded him to come down there. So off we went. Had a Mohawk tribal leader. I met an Amazonian tribal leader right before. He was at a conference in Canada. he decided to come along as well. So off we went. It was, 4 guys, 4 girls. We went to Ecuador and we rafted 700 kilometers along a tributary of the Amazon. Along the way, he discovered oil pollution because they'd just started looking for oil in the region, and they had oil pipes that were going over the Andes, and because there was no maintenance, they were breaking. And sometimes the indigenous people told us that we met along the way that the Amazon was literally flowing with oil. And another thing we discovered there's a war going on between Peru and Ecuador because 64 kilometers of the river was the border between Peru and Ecuador, deep in the jungle. And this was a war that I had heard was going on for 40 years. I had contacted the embassies to find out if it was true. Both of them denied it. But when we were in the middle of the jungle, we discovered it was true when they started shooting at us, at least from the Ecuadorian side. So it was, I got arrested a bunch of times, but nobody got hurt. That was the miracle of the journey. We came back and I wrote a fairy tale. It was a fairy tale about the journey. And that fairy tale was the story of Salvadoro the ant, the smallest of ants, who goes on the greatest of journeys and discovers this beautiful rainforest and convinces his people to save it. Up until that time, I had a stutter. I really didn't like public speaking. I thought, well, if I'm going to deliver a message, I've got to get used to this. So I took the fairy tale to a friend's school, spoke to about 45 little kids, and afterwards they called me the storyteller. I didn't stutter, and that was the end of that. And then a few months later, I read the story to over 100,000 people at Earth Day in Toronto, and everything was going fantastic. And I was planning another expedition, a much bigger one. I'd been promised a whole load of money from a food company in Canada. And right on the eve of it, they pulled the money out and just said, oh, sorry, we don't have the money. It was all my credibility had gone crashing down that I've been working so hard to build up. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do now? I was absolutely devastated. And because when I gave up my job, I also decided that I would never work for anybody except the earth. And if you're only working for the earth, it doesn't pay any money. It pays other things, but not cash. So I was soon out of money. And then on that same day, Earth Day of 1990, I was walking around Toronto, literally almost in tears. And I suddenly remembered a conference that I'd heard about that was going to take place in 1992. There was going to be some sort of Earth Summit. And I'd only heard it on the grapevine. I'd not seen it in the newspapers or anything. And I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll walk there. I'll walk from Canada down to South America to speak at this conference. And along the way, I'll speak to everybody about saving the environment. And I had all these big visions, and they'll all come out and help me, and all these wonderful things will happen. And then my next thought was, oh my God, not that, because I was driving Rolls Royces for years. The idea of walking around, thousands of miles was scary. But anyway, after 3 months, I got myself together and I started off on July 25th, 1990, walking from Canada to South America. I left with enough money for a month, and it was gone within a month. And because of that, of course, I had to talk a very good story about everything I was doing. And I managed to get support all the way through the United States. Speak at lots of universities, but it was a struggle all the way through. People on the way would tell me, they'd say, oh, you can hardly survive here in the States. How are you going to survive in Mexico and south of the border? They've got no money down there. They won't understand, and you're going to get robbed, and they're all bandits and all these positive things. When I got to Mexico, I came across the border with virtually, well, I knew absolutely nobody. But fortunately, I'd stayed with a Texan cowboy fisherman TV personality who said, "I'll get you known." Thanks to the Bishop of East Texas. So visited the Bishop of East Texas, and he said, "I'd like to bless your journey." He said, "There's 2 ways we can do this." He says, "We can do it inside my office and no one will see it, or we can do it outside where the TV's cameras are and everyone in Mexico will see it." So I said, "Oh, let's do it outside." So by the time I crossed the border in Mexico, even though I didn't know many people, there were people who knew me and what I was doing. And within a few weeks, I came to a village. I had a few people walking with me. People joined me from the States, came down to be with me at this time for a few kilometers. And we came into a little village, and there were about 25 people standing around a traffic roundabout, and in front of each of them was a hole, and in the middle of the roundabout was another hole, and each one had trees. And so a person walked up to me and he said, "Oh, hi, I'm the mayor of the village. Would you like to plant a tree with us?" So I said, "Sure, great." So I planted a tree in the middle hole. Everyone planted their tree. And for some reason, from that moment on, everywhere I went, people gave me trees to plant. I've been talking about preserving the environment, encouraging people to preserve the environment, but I hadn't been planting trees. And so it became like a symbol of my walk. And as I walked, got further and further south, next thing, there was 200 people planting trees with me, hundreds of people here, 1,000 people here. And then when you get thousands of people waiting for you, then the government starts to notice. And then I got a police escort. By the time I got to Mexico City, the president started to notice. And by the time I left Mexico City in Cuernavaca, it was my birthday, and I came outside the door, and there was a cake and a federal policeman, a federal police car, and it was a gift from the president. And I was then going to get a federal escort all the way to the border of Guatemala. So traveling with a presidential escort for thousands of kilometers increased the profile. And then I'd turn up at villages at night, and there'd be 5,000 people waiting there. We'd plant 5,000 trees, and then they'd unveil projects for, we want to plant 50,000 trees here, further south, and then 100,000 here. And then in one place, the governor totally shocked me. We had a huge press conference, and the governor's chaplain said, "We've decided to invest $1.5 million into helping to save a local rainforest," which was, well, absolutely wonderful, because on my walks, I never asked for money. It's actions that I want. And so this was way beyond what I expected governments to do, but they were doing it. And this continued all the way down through to South America. I arrived at the Earth Summit. I didn't walk all the way down there. I got as far as walked to the Panamanian Bridge, and then I was met by the Countess Mariló de Monteleon, the environmental officer for the Darien Gap, and then she invited me to a place on the border in Cabo Tiburon, deep in the Darien Gap, the magnificent rainforest. And then I began to walk again through Colombia. And then friends, because I had no money, friends flew me to the Earth Summit, where I arrived. And while I was there, I realized that there were two groups of people basically at the conference. They were the environmentalists, and they were what I would call the global democracy peace activists. And at that time, they weren't working together. There were two separate things, doing this and doing that. And so I came away thinking, I would like to unite the two. We need to work together. So I went back to the United States, went out to California, decided to create a movement based around the 25th anniversary of Earth Day and the 50th anniversary of the United Nations, which took place in 1990. I was living in a tree at the time, a redwood tree, because I couldn't afford to live anywhere else, but I loved the redwood tree. It was wonderful. I would go to sleep at night, and sometimes I'd imagine I had a 300-foot brain, and I would see myself rising through the tree and looking over the forest and enjoying the universe. And so I pulled together this coalition, and then while I was doing that, a woman came up. She was from Zagreb, Croatia, and they'd been fighting a terrible war over there in former Yugoslavia. And she said, we'd like to do something to celebrate the Earth, you know. And I was really amazed. In the middle of a war, people want to celebrate the Earth. Wow, that's fantastic, you know. Because one thing I realized, that having walked through, especially through Salvador, which had just finished the civil war 2 weeks earlier when I came through there, I realized the massive impact of war, not only on humanity, but on the environment we need to exist. And so I thought, what on earth can we do? A small, you know, I mean, as big as it could be, but small coalition to help, you know, in a case of a war. Anyway, I decided that, I know what I could do. I can walk there. I can walk from San Francisco through to Sarajevo, so and then I can spread a message about peace through environmental restoration. Because I've noticed that when you have wars, if you don't restore the environment soon, then you slip into a terrible cycle of more and more wars, as can be seen in a lot of countries today. The environment is a hidden casualty of war. And so I set off to walk through to Sarajevo, and when I arrived there, the war was in full steam. Sarajevo was under bombardment. It had been under siege for 3 years. I got the tree. This was one of the rare times when I actually carried a tree with me, because people always gave me trees to plant. I got the tree from a bombed out house just before I got into Sarajevo, because I realized they had to chop down 80% of their trees to survive 3 years of siege. And Sarajevo was legendary for its greenery. It was their heritage. That was the greater part of their heritage. So for them to cut down the trees was a monumental thing for their hearts, to destroy the very thing that they loved in order to exist. And so I carried that tree through trenches in a tunnel and into the city, and planted that tree on April 22nd, 1995. Because of the success of these walks, I decided to continue walking around the planet, spreading this message of peaceful environmental restoration, planting trees for people killed at war, and did several of the walks. And finally, in 2004, I found myself in Japan, having been invited there. I walked through Japan, and then at the end of my walk, I gave a speech in Tokyo, and one of the people in the audience, she could speak English. And when you speak to a group of people and it's done through a translator, it helps if somebody in the audience can speak English, because when you say something funny, they laugh and key everybody up to the idea that something funny coming along. So I noticed these people straight away. And as it happens, this one was a very beautiful young lady. And she came up to me afterwards, and she said, she asked a couple of questions. One of them was, where do you get your trees? And then the other one was, she said, I'm an author. Would you mind if I wrote about you on my blog? And I said, no, that's fine. That would be great. And so that was it. And I remember thinking at the time, wow, I wish I was staying here a bit longer. But as it happens, I was leaving 2 days later, and I went back to Britain. But I was also coming back to Japan because I'd been chosen as one of 100 Earth lovers to speak at Expo in 2005. And I was back in Britain for the first time in a few years, and I got a message from the author, Konomi, and asking if it would be okay she wrote a book about my life. An editor had read her blog and wanted them to write a book about my life. So I said, sure. So she wrote a book about my life. I went back to Japan. We got together for the book release, and then because she wrote about my life of walking, she decided she'd like to come for a walk with me. And I was walking around Okinawa, the island, the island that was most devastated at the end of World War II, through the war. So she walked around, and fairly soon after we got married. And one of the things I told Konomi when we got married is, I'm going to find you the most beautiful place on earth, place with beautiful forests, with fresh water, with fresh air, and safe, and hopefully far away from war and devastation. And we went on a little look around the planet. And we went to Britain. I was thinking Scotland, and then I was thinking, no. I was thinking about Canada, where I live. But all of the places where I was thinking, there was always a reason why not there. And we went to Mexico because I love Mexico. And we rented a house for 6 months in the mountains. Very, very beautiful. Really, really, really beautiful. And then, but it was always in a state of revolution. And that was the last thing we wanted. I was thinking, last thing we want is for a revolution to come through the door. The people are wonderful, but it's very unstable. So one day I was looking at the internet, and I saw this, places for sale in Chile and Patagonia. And to be honest, I had never been here, and I'd always thought of Patagonia as Argentina, because that's the largest part. And I said to Konomi, look at this, look at these beautiful forests and stuff. Let's go. So she said, sure. So we got on a plane and we flew to Chile, and we immediately went off down to the south of the land. And you can't drive to Patagonia in Chile. It's just no roads coming through Chile to it. So we spent about 16 hours on a ferry. And in the morning, we looked out and you could see these big forests and big mountains, vast nature. And so we instantly knew that this was where we were going to live. And then we spent the next 6 months on buses in the middle of winter, driving all the way through Patagonia, looking for 1,000 kilometers in the most incredible harsh conditions in the middle of winter to find a piece of land. And we finally found a piece of land of just under a hectare of land on the side of a hill with a magnificent view. It's a former cow pasture, badly eroded, been destroyed by cattle over the years. It used to be a part of the forest. But for us, it was perfect. There was not a single tree. There was not a single plant. The grass looked like it had been, looked like a pool table. That was it. There was nothing else. A badly eroded pool table. But for us, it was perfect because it was like a blank canvas. We didn't have to destroy anything to make it beautiful. We didn't have to clear any trees. What we had to do was plant trees. And so in 2009, we came back to, in between time, we also walked through China. We had walked through China a little bit earlier, and the Chinese Minister of Forestry had invited us to come back and help China to green the Olympics. So in 2007, we walked for a year through China from Hong Kong to Beijing to help green the Olympics. That was an incredible ordeal, to be honest, because China is absolutely nothing like Patagonia. It was extremely contaminated. We only had a 2 days out of a year's worth of walking where we could even get close to the idea of sipping water from a stream, in this case, a national park. The rivers ran black, and we saw some most horrendous things. And one of the most horrendous things is that when you think of pollution normally on a vast scale, you usually think of it as industrial pollution. But in the case of China, that pollution was so far spread, it was way beyond industrial pollution. Every day we would walk, if we walked 15 kilometers in a day, we would pass at least 5 fires burning, 5 local fires where everyone's burning plastic and all the garbage. And a lot of these times it would be right on the edge of farms, by rivers, in rice paddies. And you could imagine all of those contaminants very easily going into the rivers and into the food systems. And so if you could imagine the size of China, and then think, if you walk 15 kilometers in this day, you're going to see 4 or 5 fires of plastic burning, and then go out this direction and any direction, and you could see the same thing. You've realized just how bad the contamination is. And so every day we were dreaming about Patagonia, about coming back here. And in the end, we did. We began to plant trees. And that we also began to plant our house in 2000. I say plant our house because our house is built out of earth. It's called earth bags. You take bags what you might put potatoes into, for example, and you fill them full of earth, and you compact that earth in the bags, and then you lay them like bricks to build your house. In between every row, you have a line or 2 lines of barbed wire. The barbed wire helps create tensile stress. So this is actually one of the most stable forms to have during an earthquake, especially in the form of a dome. Our house is rectangular, so we built our house. It's a small place, a small cabin, with these earth bag walls. And then we burned it. We piled a lot of turf and earth at the sides, and we insulated it, not on the inside, but on the outside. Before we piled the earth up on the outside to create more insulation, we insulated the ground around the house to about 3 to 6 meters with a little bit of polystyrene sheeting and a bit of plastic on a slight slope. So any water that seeped through the grass would eventually be taken away. And then we have ponds. So all of the water that falls on our roof invisibly filters through the earth, through about 1.5 meters of grass and earth, and then filters on down and it goes into our ponds. We've created 19 ponds on our land so that we do not have to worry about the fact that if it does get dry. Now, we are not on municipal water. We have a stream on the back of our land that we can access legally, so we can take our drinking water from there, and we do. But for a few months of the year, and increasingly in the last few years, like at first it was for 3 months we had no water. Now it can be sometimes 5 months. Climate change is impacting here as well. It means that we can store in our 19 ponds 160,000 litres of water that enable us to water our permaculture gardens. At the same time as, and the insulation on the outside, what happens is that because the earth is drying beneath the house and around the house, because we're taking the water away, then each year, through the sunlight that comes into the window and through the fire that we have over the winter, each year the soil beneath our house gets drier and drier. We have no insulation beneath the house. It gets drier and drier. And then, as the years go by, when winter comes, the heat that's stored in the earth begins to rise. And it's warmer, it rises because it's warmer, and then it heats up the house. 7 or 8 years ago, when it was -5 outside, it would be 2 degrees centigrade inside. Now, when it's -5 outside, it's around 12 degrees centigrade inside. That's a 17-degree difference. In less than 30 minutes, with our little fire, I can have this place to 21 to 25 degrees. So we save a tremendous amount of firewood. And even though we're surrounded by forests, I do not want to use our forests to warm up. And so this is the whole reason for building our house. While we've been building the house, we planted now it's 1,350 indigenous trees, local trees, of around about 30 species. I began planting them about 10 years ago, a few hundred at a time. We get them as gifts from the local forestry department, who have really come to like what we're doing here. And we have created a small forest. And with this forest, we have now many local berries. We have nuts. Apart from the ones living in the house, we have the ones outside the house growing on the trees. And so increasingly, we are buying less and less. We are, now these trees, some of them are perhaps 10, 11, 12 meters. We've just recently planted another 150 trees. We actually planted 30 birch trees, which are not from here, but they're not invasive. We planted the 30 birch trees because we can tap them. Eventually, in about 10 years, we'll be able to tap those trees for the water. And then in Eastern Europe, in the old days, they used to tap them in spring and then drink the water. And you can get about, I think they say 20 gallons of water from one big sized tree. And then this they would drink in the spring to give them resistance against viruses and the bugs and stuff like that, which they did for a long time in Eastern Europe and other places. the species that we planted. So I think someone just asked if I'm not very good at looking at the chat while I'm talking. So if someone sees something I should get to chat answering, let me know. Yeah, we've a friend of ours studying at the university here in Chile, ecology as it happens, recently identified all of the species with the Latin names, because here in Chile, in remote areas, people, you know, I mean, I don't know the Latin names, let alone, you know, people on farms down here, you know, like everyone has the local names for trees. Well, he's identified the scientific names for us, so we know all of the trees and the species what we've got. But with planting these trees, we've also regenerated the natural biodiversity, because at least 5 or 6 species we didn't plant have come back naturally, as well as many species of ferns, many types of other plants. So that pretty well is where we are right now. We have permaculture gardens, and we have created new types of greenhouses. One of them is called a Walapini. This is also earth sheltered, because in these types of greenhouses, we can cultivate things we cannot possibly cultivate otherwise, because they're sheltered by the earth, in a way very similar to our house here. We have growing, and this is Patagonia, we have growing avocado trees, and just recently, papaya. We've just started growing papaya. So this way we are helping to expand the biodiversity of the region, and we now have about 100 types of vegetables, fruits, and berries that we harvest, and then we sell the seeds increasingly throughout the country. When we first started here, we had no intention of doing these things. It just kind of naturally evolves, and it's one of the most wonderful things about this is that a few years ago there was no kale in Patagonia. No one was growing kale. No one heard about it. We buy our seeds from up north. We look around for organic seeds. We bring them down here, and then if we succeed, then we begin to sell them. And all of this, of course, is totally organic. And just a couple of years ago, we had a whole load of kale seeds, and we went to a street market, a government street market, to help sell our seeds. And the only seed people didn't buy was the kale, because everybody had kale. And that's very, very rewarding, you know, because all of those kale have come from those few seeds. So I've spoken very fast. I've touched on a lot of issues, and I've done so in the hope that you will feel inspired to ask questions about any of those things that I talked about.
Thank you so much, Paul. All right, questions now. So we got one question from Gabrielle. How did you choose the species and types of native trees to plant in the different places that you've traveled?
Right. Well, I didn't, for the most part, when I was walking around the planet, I didn't choose the trees. People did. Sometimes those trees will be planted anywhere from people's gardens to botanical gardens, to parks, to places that were going to be reforested. So they were usually, I would say that the vast majority of them were local trees, indigenous trees, with the occasional rare tree planted in a botanical garden. As in, for example, I'm thinking of Tianjin in China, Coventry in Britain. You know, we planted, I planted a lot of trees in botanical gardens, but they're generally all local trees.
So the next question is from Marco. What do you believe we can do in our own personal lives to have a better relationship with the environment?
Oh, wow. As much as you possibly can, as soon as you can do it. I was just reading today, by the way, I'm not sure if you saw the article in The Guardian, but it was listing about 20% of the planet's nations are on the verge of ecological collapse. Like it's, you know, and in the so-called developed world, sad to say, Australia is right up at the top, along with South Africa. About that, it's a very interesting report, and a scary one. But my gosh, right, everything we're doing is with that in mind. We grow our own food. We've created a route called Austral Garden route with our friends. So when tourists come down here, that we can introduce them to local people through our farms, and then we are introducing all sorts of forms of permaculture, different forms of agriculture. We're giving workshops to show the benefits. Like, for instance, we grow local berries, maqui berries. This is a highly sought after berry in the world. It's a superfood. Well, we can grow them like weeds, and so we collect the berries and we make them into vinegars. We give workshops on how to make the vinegars. The workshops people can sell. The vinegars people can sell when they make them. They can also live off them. They get the health benefits. We are teaching as much as possible how to create a local economy. Local economy is vital, because even here in Patagonia, for example, in our tiny little village in the middle of nowhere, I can go to the store right now and I can buy garlic from China. Now, that's crazy, because we're growing garlic here, and Chile is one of the most rich countries, diverse countries for these things. And right now, what is happening is we're shipping products all over the planet. It doesn't matter what countries we are, but we're shipping products everywhere when we can grow them ourselves. And so it is time to start local economies, to reduce the consumption. I spent years at sea. I know exactly what goes on at sea. What happens is you get these ships, the moment they leave the port, they're dumping all of the garbage over the side. And then you get the oil tankers. I worked on oil tankers. What happens is, as soon as you leave the port and you're out of the deep sea and they need to clean the tanks, they're pumping all sorts of chemicals in it and they're pumping it over the side. You know, so this constant consumption and need for transportation is devastating the planet. So I would suggest that take a look at every single thing that you buy. Look and see, can I get this locally? When we buy things here, first thing we do is, right, we go to the store, right? We want to buy local. If we have to buy anything, we can't grow it, we want to buy local, made here. If we can't get stuff here, which of course we can't, bananas don't grow in the Hunter yet, unless I can make them grow, they don't grow here. So we have to get them from somewhere else. But first we think of the country. Then we think, okay, let's buy nationally. If we can't buy it nationally, then at least keep to the continent. Like I know we can get coffee and bananas in South America, so we stick to the continent. You know, only at the rarest cases, like for instance, some things like anything to do with machinery and stuff like that, we have to go beyond that if we need anything. But I'd say it is absolutely vital. Probably the most important thing to do is to begin to take a handle on what it is you personally are doing with your consumptive patterns. Because if people reduce the consumption of products damaging places like the Amazon or wherever, you know, then and buy local, then we are going to send a message to producers of these things, you know. And so for me, that is absolutely vital. We don't recycle anything. The reason we don't recycle anything is because we take care of it ourselves. We reuse it. We can't recycle here because we're so distant from everywhere. There's no real recycling plants. And, you know, so when you realize you have to take care of your own garbage, you make sure you don't buy it. You know, like we go out to the store and we're not going to, you know, we're very cognizant about everything we buy, the packaging it comes in. You know, because we have got to take care of that. We can't just, there is a municipal garbage dump, but we don't actually have the truck come. We could take it there. But I know that in the garbage dump, it's just the same as any other garbage dump around the planet. Generally, they're built right by a stream, of all things, but they have a tendency to put them in little hidden valleys where people don't see them. And then the water, all the batteries and whatever else rubbish is in there flows out into the water and poisons the neighborhood. So we look at every single thing we buy because we don't want to buy all of this junk that somehow we're on our land of what the heck are we going to do with this? We have fiestas and our friends come with beer, right? Okay, bottle of beer, I can do something with. I can always use those bottles for something. Sometimes for vinegars. And what I do is I get a bottle of vinegar, make it, and I sell it. Sometimes I actually buy a beer for 2,500 pesos and then put vinegar in it and sell it for 5,000 pesos. That's, I like that magic stuff. So yes, these things are vital. It might seem like they're nothing, but if everybody did it, it would be something very big. And the more people that do it, in fact, it's absolutely necessary, because without this sort of understanding of what it is we do, companies will and politicians will never really change, because we'll never have the impetus to change and we'll never have the desire. But once you start on this path, then every single part of your life is focused on that. You don't do anything that you know will hurt the planet.
It's such an important thing, yeah. Like Paul, what you said is just taking responsibility for the planet rather than waiting for our politicians to do it for us. Few more questions, Paul. One is from Connor. What do you do for electricity? Are you also just connected to the normal grid, or yeah?
No, we're on solar.
Solar.
Yeah, we have solar panels. We don't have much, but by the way, in the way of solar panels, it doesn't have to be expensive. We only have around 390 watts of solar panel, which is very small, but our system is 12 volts. It's when you get into the 220 volt thing, and using all the appliances 220 that you need to generate a lot of power. We have relatively small batteries. We only have 300 amps. And then for tools, like for, if I want to cut wood on a circular saw, then I have a generator in order to be able to do that. Because the system, it would not be cost effective to get a system to power a little saw. So we are not connected to any form of municipal water or electricity. We are definitely off the grid.
Absolutely. Fantastic. And so another question from Ruba. Your journey sounds incredible and absolutely beautiful. Was there a point where you felt like giving up? And if so, what got you through it?
I never felt like giving up. I felt like I was going to drop dead sometimes. I always thought, especially in the United States, it's funny because, you think, like say, in the wealthy countries, it must be easier to survive, if you're wandering around with no money and doing something like this, right? But it's not. It's actually easier to survive in a place like Mexico, Guatemala, Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama than it is in the United States, because these people are used to the idea of someone who may not have much, and so then can be far more giving. In the United States, related to that question, I can distinctly remember one time where I was walking and I hadn't eaten for a couple of days, I think, and I was literally felt like I was going to fall down, and I thought, at times you got to think of yourself, but, I always find myself thinking of myself in a fairy tale character to keep going, and I would think, well, if you're going to find me, I'm going to falling down, I'm going to find me falling forward, not backwards, and I would see myself, I would imagine myself like a knight in shining armor, right, ahead of an army of people dawdling behind me. And I'd be there with a big lance, prodding all of the people, all of the army destroying the forest, waiting to see if anybody was coming up behind me, and these sort of daydreams would keep me, going along. But I never felt like giving up. It was always a no option, and it was also because, you see, I made that vow that I would only work for the earth, and so what else could I do except carry on?
Wow, that's very inspiring, Paul. Question from my colleague Melissa, who's also joined us today. If you could go back and change one thing you did with the knowledge you have now, what would it be and why?
Oh, well, one thing that I did. Well, that's a very good question. It helps me to think of something about no regrets, which is good. I've never really thought about that. If there's anything I could change, I mean, I really don't know.
We'll let you think about that one, Paul.
Paul, I'm a big believer in no regrets as well. The reason I asked it was I find myself as going in my career, things that I've learned now, my younger self would have been a lot wiser to have had that knowledge or tool, and I might have been a better force for good at that moment. That, you know, that was sort of my intention of the question, but I know what you mean. No regrets is an ideal way to be.
Yeah, well, with that explanation, I would say the only thing that I would have liked to have done was to have begun when I was about 12. to have done all this, begun this years earlier, you know, that's about the only thing I can think of now. But when I was thinking about regrets, my first thought was I was thinking about South Africa, and I was walking along the coast of the Indian Ocean through along the side of a dense rainforest. And, you know, I've been told no one had ever done it, you know, but people have said that it could be possible. So I decided to try it. And I found myself taking a shortcut, jumping into the sea and everything. And next thing you know, being swept out to sea. And then clinging onto the side of big cliffs and being smashed about and finally being whacked by several waves. And then I realized that I was now about 100 meters offshore by the side of these big cliffs, and that I was going to drown. And I found myself floating face down in the water. And I was there floating face down. And then I thought about my mom, and I thought about my family, and I thought, oh, you know. And then I thought, I had no regrets. I had no regrets, and I was so at peace. And I thought, it was really nice that I had no regrets. I was so grateful for that. And the next minute, this big wave came. And I think because I was so relaxed, it picked me up. And when it picked me up, I knew that it wasn't going to take me halfway to the beach, that it was going to take me all the way to the beach. And then it dumped me on the beach, and I lay down in the water, like half dead. And then the reason I would take on this crazy route was because of the rainforest was full of thorns. Like in Africa, they have these big hooks, like, you know, like really sharp thorns. And I didn't want to go through this. So I had to climb this cliff, and then I ended up struggling my way for an hour through a couple of kilometers, I think, fighting my way through this forest, being absolutely covered in blood, doing the one thing I didn't want to do. Ended up, and then I came to a river, and it was kind of funny. I was like so tired. I thought, well, maybe I can take my boots off and use them as a flotation pillow. So, and then I'm kind of like just floating across this river. It's a beautiful setting. I mean, it's an Indian Ocean, beautiful, you know, forest. And I'm there halfway across the river, and I suddenly remembered that this was a place known for tiger sharks. And I walked around, I'm covered in blood, and I thought, don't think about that, Paul. Don't think about it. And when I got to the other side, I was being supported by the South African Department of Water Affairs and Forestry. And one of the people who'd been escorting me, but couldn't obviously for this part of the trip, he was waiting on the other side, panicking because he thought I was dead. And he come down the slope and he sees me and he says, my God, he said, you look like Robinson Crusoe on the 6th day. So, yeah, no regrets.
That's really amazing. That's so inspirational. And how much we can just trust nature to take care of us when we really do let go and, you know, surrender to it.
Yeah, surrender is the right word. It's the most powerful thing. I've had when I was going into Sarajevo on the 5th time I was arrested, they were talking about killing me. And I had my book of fairy tales. I travel with a huge journal. In fact, if I can, I'll try and get it out now. And this journal I took with me into Sarajevo. And the soldiers who were talking about killing me was along the front lines. Eventually they searched my backpack and they pulled out the book. This is my book of fairy tales. And I would write in this as I journeyed. You know, I would talk about what had happened and all this sort of stuff. And they pulled it out, and the guy was talking about killing me for 2 hours. Who will come looking for me were I to disappear and all this sort of stuff. And finally they pulled out the book, and the commander had it on his lap, and the translator could speak excellent English. And then I got so tired of all of the questions about me disappearing, defending my life, that I just stood up and I took the book off his lap and I held it up. And I said, hey, it's a fairy tale. And at that moment, I just looked down the valley I'd come and I thought, well, I never expected to die here, but if that's it, then so be it. And I felt perfectly at ease. And then the next question that came back through the translator was, he always spoke such excellent English. My dear Paul, my commander would like to know, what is it that you would like? So I said, what do you mean? What would I like? He said, would you like some food? Would you like some money? Would you like a car? So surrender is, it's kind of like Aikido in a way. The art of no resistance. You know, people think because you go to a war, you're best off with a gun. But if you can master the art of no resistance, then negative energy flows past you. You're not there blocking it. There's nowhere to attack because the energy is dissipated. So surrender is very, very useful. That's the beauty of walking around the planet, is the magic you discover. The things that you would never otherwise imagine. The abilities, the things we can do. You know, just the connections you can have with animals. You know, I once saw a little squirrel in a tree in Wales, and I was looking at it, and I thought, oh, that looks great, it looks very happy. And it ran up the tree, and then it started going like this, very excited. And so I laughed, and then it went, and I laughed again, and it went like this, and we carried on for about 5 minutes like this, you know, total connection with the creature. And, you know, those things, you learn how to connect with things. You can walk close up to creatures. If you speak to them, not in your voice, but if you speak to them in your mind, and you know, oh, how beautiful you are, how wonderful. Can I get a little bit closer? I'd love to see you up close. You're so beautiful. And then you just carry on walking, and then next thing you know, you're standing next to this thing you could never otherwise get anywhere near to. Those things, that's the magic of it. I slept outside at least 2,000 nights without a tent. 200 of those nights in graveyards. You know, and you just get to have the most magical encounters. I woke up to find a fox trying to get into my sleeping bag. I woke up to find a deer standing right next to me. One time I woke up to find, I thought it was like a sword fight in the Highlander, clashing. And what on earth's that? And I looked, and in the shadows, I could see these two mighty deer stags with the horns fighting, like very close. Like just sounded like a sword fight. And then they stopped, and one of them came walking over to me, and he stood looking at me, and I was laying there like, oh my gosh, because he got his massive antlers. I thought he was going to go, and just lay there looking up at it. But those things, that's
magic. It truly is like a fairy tale. And I hope you publish your book. Like this needs to get in the hands of people around the world. We'll have a talk about that. But it's so we've come to the end of. In fact, we've gone 10 minutes past the hour. But and there's still some students have stayed back to listen to these wonderful stories, and we have more questions. But I might just pass on some of those questions to you, and then. We can share that response back to the class if that's okay with you, Paul.
Yes, of course.
But I just wanted to thank you again so much for inspiring us all with your stories, and with your wisdom and really important messages to really connect with our environment, with nature, source food locally. There are little things we can all, each of us, do individually and collectively to save our planet and protect our planet, and just be able to trust it more, be able to trust our nature and surrender. And going back to what you mentioned is just really trusting. I think that's something we lack a lot in our some of our civilized nations. I think there's much less trust in first world countries than in some of the countries which are might not have so much in terms of material wealth, but then they have such a deeper connection to what really matters and what is actually real, not fabricated, which is economies are fabricated, imagined in the minds of people, right? It's not real, but whereas our nature is. So thank you so much again for giving us your time, and we really look forward to reconnecting again soon. And please do keep in touch and keep us updated on all the great things you're doing, Paul. So everyone, could please join me to thank Paul and do a virtual clap, or just turn on your videos and just thank you. Thank you so much, Paul. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for all of this, and time flew by. I'm very, very happy to do this, and would love to do it again, and could talk about all sorts of things. So there we go.
Love to have you back. Looking forward to that again. Thanks so much, Paul.
Okay.
Enjoy the rest of your night.
Oh yeah, thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
You too.
Thanks, everyone. So have a great week, and we'll be in touch. Bye-bye.
Hasta luego.